Hey queer friends, are you ready to be inspired? Welcome to Season 5 of Coming Out and Beyond, a podcast that shares stories from the LGBTQIA+ community. Here's your host, Anne-Marie Zanzal.
Hi, this is Anne-Marie Zanzal, and welcome back to another episode of Coming Out and Beyond LGBTQIA+ Stories. I am very excited today to welcome back to the show one of my favorite latent lifers, Miriam Grace. Miriam is based in the UK and has been working as a psychotherapist for 34 years. She researches and writes about what therapists need to understand about women in midlife, women coming out later in life, and the problems of applying straight psychology to lesbian relationships. Her clients these days all identify as women, and 50% are lesbian or bisexual. Miriam, welcome back to the show.
Hi, it's great. It's great to be back, and I've been looking forward to this particular topic since we last spoke.
Yes. So we're going to do a little turn on the episode today because I'm going to share part of my personal story that I don't usually share. And Miriam's going to do some listening and some interjecting, and she's going to really sort of be my therapist for half of this episode. And then we're going to talk more about how you can help yourself when you're going through something like this. So Miriam knows I have 4 children, and my second child and I are estranged from each other. It is not something that I have chosen. It is my second child who has chosen this. And it's the biggest fear, right, of when we're coming out later in life. And so, we don't want to lose our children. That, like, across the board, when people start coming out later in life and they do have children, they say, I just don't want to lose any of my kids in all this process. And so in this process, I have. And so what has happened is my deepest fear has come true. Now, it didn't happen right away. My child is the second of my children, and and I call them they because they're non-binary. It was a long, slow decline. They really had a really hard time when their dad and I got divorced. And over the years, I had noticed they were becoming more and more hostile to me. Like, I would call and they wouldn't say anything, or we would text and I would say something, and the response was often angry. And it has been one of the most hardest things I thought coming out was hard, and it was. But I'm also a much very different person than when I started that process of coming out 8 years ago. And my child slowly pulling away and then ultimately cutting off any type of communication for me has been really, really difficult. And I've gone through a tremendous grief process over it. I have sought help, and I'm okay. But Miriam and I wanted to talk about estrangement today, because 31% of adults and children, parents and children, there is estrangement, which is an astronomical number. And I really wanted to think about it for myself, but also for our listeners out there who may have had to deal with an estrangement or want to support someone who is going through that. So Miriam, can you talk to us a little bit about estrangement?
Well, I think I was saying to you that, it can come from different places. There's your situation, isn't there, of your child or your adult child rejecting you. We know that some of our later in lifers, their parents, their elderly parents might reject them. Or in coming out, you know, part of our community, someone in our community might feel that it's no longer healthy for them, and they might, someone our age might reject their parents.
Mhm.
And so, you know, it can be from either party, and
Mhm.
there's lots of
Mhm.
different reasons for that. I think that, you know, one of the things, you know, that my partner's a lifelong lesbian, and her family rejected her, so it was the other way around, when she
Mhm.
was a teenager, because of her sexuality. And we often say other people do not realize what a privilege it is to have family support. It's one of
Right.
those hidden privileges, but it's, you know, it has such an impact on education, your relationships, your happiness, finances, all sorts of things. And I think one of the things about this ruptured bond is that when somebody dies, we have a grief, and we're working through that ending, and we'll never see them again, you
Mhm.
know, as far as we know, or on this plane anyway. And when we become estranged from somebody, there isn't that certainty, there isn't that ending. You know, there's the hope. So the hope of this can be mended also prolongs the agony, because you know, it's partly denial in, you know,
Mhm.
in many cases, that
Mhm.
hope is partly denial, but you don't want to give up the hope. Um,
Absolutely.
so
Completely
how
understand.
do you go through the loss? How do you process an ending or the grief when, you know, when it hasn't happened? And then we have all the, you know, the usual things that happen when trauma happens to us. Is this my fault? What did I do
Absolutely.
wrong? What could I do differently? How can I try harder? What do I need to change about myself? And they're all questions with no answer. And sometimes, you know, I've had friends and clients where they have received some sort of form of answer from the child who's rejected them, perhaps labeled them as a toxic parent. And
Right.
we're reading through these things and going, oh, that's a great thing that you did, that you know, that you know, I'm thinking, oh, this is a list of really good parenting with good boundaries. Um,
Mhm.
and I think something I mentioned to you before we started recording is my sadness around the fact that there is a culture, sadly in my profession, in psychotherapy, about, oh, your parents are toxic, you know, cut them off. And I don't understand quite what's in it for therapists to sort of push that agenda around situations where there isn't abuse, you know.
So, you know, and I have so much to say.
Yeah. Mm,
So, like Miriam's wife, my wife
mm,
is estranged from their father, her father.
mm,
Her father started the estrangement, not my wife.
mm,
So when she came out, well, actually, she was outed. When she was outed in her, you know, mid-20s, um, Tanda's, yeah, Tanda's dad slowly began to pull away from her.
mm,
And now they haven't talked in maybe 20, 30 years. I mean, when they go to a family, like when they go to a funeral and they're both there,
mm,
Tanda says hi, they hug, but that's about it.
mm,
Um, and it has, uh, Tanda, it's been really interesting to live with somebody who's reconciled the loss. But I
mm,
also know, as somebody who is like works with people who has grief, I also dread when he dies, because I know that she will go most likely through another grief process of losing her father. but also losing what she didn't have with her
Yeah.
dad, because he was a quite loving and supportive father when she was young. She always jokes, if anyone was going to, she's always jokes that her dad made her a lesbian because, taught her how to shoe horses. She drove tractors. She grew up, he had a farm. And so she was expected to do everything, as a girl. There was he did not have any limits on what she could do because she was a girl. And so she did a lot of boy things, quote unquote, air quotes, boy things with him. It's hard for me to talk about this because there's shame. There is shame. Like what Miriam said is, what did I do wrong? How could I have done it better? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? And also too, because I am somebody that does content and does support for this community. I often hesitate to talk about this because I don't want people not to come out because of what's happened to me, because so I'm very, very careful to talk about this because I don't want to frighten anybody.
It does happen to straight mums as well.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
And
Actually,
process.
Yeah. Actually, my old therapist, she has a lot of women that are in their 50s that have gotten divorced, and every single one of them has an estranged child.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the moms they get. I have a sense that it is unconscious patriarchy.
Yes, and that's something I think I mentioned last time is that we're conditioned in this society to believe that that women are responsible for relationship, which means when relationships go wrong, we immediately go to what did I do wrong? But I also think other people think, what did she do in a heterosexual marriage, divorce? What did she do wrong? Because it's part of our role is to keep everybody happy, to be attentive to emotions and feelings. And I think the role of mother becomes very idealized.
Yes.
So that the opportunity for us letting our child down is 100%. We will we will get it wrong, because the expectation isn't real. The role of mother does not have space for a woman who has a sense of self or their own personal needs. So the role means that we can put ourself on hold, we can put our needs on hold for a length of time. But when what's asked of us is that we put ourselves on hold for 24 hours a day
for the rest of our lives.
Exactly. Sooner or later, we will let them down, and we won't be in that role because we'll say, you know what? No, I am not doing that for you because I need to do this for me.
Well, and I have a sense that my child idealized me. And quick story. This is actually, and I also think they idealized the relationship between my ex-husband and I. I really think they do. So they are very talented. They are a writer, and they were in college, and they wrote a play that won an award, and it was performed. You know what it was about, Miriam?
No.
This was before I came out, but not very far before, a couple months, 3-4 months, I believe, or maybe it was the year before, I'm not sure. But it was about a woman who was dying in hospice, and she had 2 children, and the chaplain, which I used to be, was the hero of the play. And the mother was dying in hospice, but she was a lesbian, and had was in love with her yoga instructor, and that was the play my child wrote.
Wow.
That won an award. Yeah, Foreshadowing, right?
Mm.
And it was very interesting. In the play, they portrayed the dad as a box salesman. And I thought that was really, really interesting. Did my child, like in some deeper level, had a sixth sense of what is going on, or a subconscious idea of what was going on? I have no idea, but I think it's like unbelievable that they wrote a play
Yeah,
about that.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that we were very connected. One thing that I did do wrong when they were little, they were the child that I was closest to. And a lot of times they knew a lot about my emotions because I did not have anyone to share it with, because my ex-husband was impossible to connect with on an emotional level. And so that was the child that heard a lot of and so they became a little bit parentified, very minorly, but they were definitely parentified. And I know that, and I've like years ago, I apologized to that for them, to them. But I find that it was really amazing that they wrote that play. And I don't think this is the first time Miriam's ever heard about this. I haven't told you about that
No,
before.
I didn't know about that. It's really
Yeah,
interesting.
it is
Yeah.
really
And
interesting.
there's something that strikes, sorry, I'm interrupting, but something that
Well,
strikes.
let me just one
Yes,
thing.
do
But
finish.
okay, so I was a hospice chaplain then,
Mm, mm,
and the hospice chaplain was the person that sort of moved the play forward,
mm,
and she was sort of like the hero
mm,
of the play. So I know that my child idealized me, and also idealized the relationship. Given that play, I mean, it was a close-knit family given all the circumstances, but also really idealized the relationship between my ex and I,
mm.
and who we were.
Yes. I think that some of what occurred to me as I was listening to the play, or about the play, was that your child's acceptance of somebody being in love with a woman when they were in a straight marriage was there for the character in the play. But like I was saying, that the acceptance, or the allyship even, can apply to everybody except your mother.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, out of all the people like in my life, when I was first coming out, that child said, "Mom, this is just a phase for you. It's like when you're really into yoga." They said that to me.
Yes,
And
yes.
and also they went to art school. They went to theater school. They were surrounded by queer people. I think they were also trying to find their place in the queer community, and they didn't come out as non-binary until they were 27 or 28. And so they were trying to find their place in the queer community. I'm not sure if they've slept. I'm not sure if they've experienced experimented with their orientation. I don't know. But I think they had tons of queer friends. They were so, I mean, they're part of the community. And so also as a member of the community, this estrangement feels double. Barb, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Straight women do not lie awake at night wondering if they're gay.
Okay, yes, that's a fair statement. I agree. But what if you've always thought you were straight and you can't get a woman out of your head thinking that you want to be more than just friends?
Well, I think the best thing to do is to sign up for Beyond the Closet Door, our free online workshop, May 7th through 9th at 7 p.m. Central Time.
And who's this workshop for?
It's for any woman, cis, trans, or non-binary, who is comfortable in women's spaces, who may be rethinking their sexual identity and wondering if they aren't quite as straight as they thought they were.
Okay, is this workshop for women of all ages?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, that all sounds great. So how does someone sign up for the free workshop?
So the link to sign up is comingoutsupport.net, and you'll find it in our podcast show notes too.
So that's Beyond the Closet Door, a free online workshop, and you can sign up at comingoutssupport.net.
Yep. See you there.
Yes.
Because when you're in our LGBTQ community, you know that people struggle with this, have estrangement all the time. And this is so much more painful because they're queer.
Yes, I'm feeling that with you. I can feel this experience, and I went through an experience for it was about 3 months, but as we were saying before, we don't know when we're in an estrangement from a child, whether it's going to be 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, 3 decades, but we just don't know. And my younger child, who's also as lesbian, stopped speaking to me for 3 months, and the pain I was in, you'll understand, but I really felt on the edge of sanity. It was almost like I couldn't compute. It was so painful. And what's interesting is, now, of course, this is some years on now, but when I make sense of it now, is that quite a lot of it was to do with the importance at that age of individuation, of separation from the mother. And, let's not put too fine a point on it. You and I both have quite big personalities, Anne-Marie. We are what you see, you get, and we say what we mean, and so on. So there's this sense of, it's really important to separate from your mother. And as human beings, we get sort of 2 phases where that's the main aim in life, and that's when you're about age 2 and you realize that you're separate, and you start to say no and throw things on the floor and so on, or the terrible 2 tantrums. Then again, when we're a teenager, but we also get all different phases through life where if we've not done what we needed to do at those points, we can do it then. And so my daughter stopped speaking to me, and I knew she was angry, and she messaged me to say she wanted no contact. And I went through, what have I done? What can I do? All of the stuff that we were talking about with you. Well, when we've discussed it more recently, turns out that the problem with me is that I might say, but what are you feeling? How are you feeling about that? Could I pay for you perhaps to have some counselling? Do you think that might help? Do you want a hug? And I would ask questions, whereas she was talking to her dad, which stung. I can't tell you how much that stung. She's talking to her dad, but as both my kids have said to me, oh, Dad, if there's anything emotional going on, he just disconnects or leaves the room. Right. So he was the person that my daughter needed at this point in her life, because she was making a decision about something that she didn't really want to go into all the feelingy stuff. And her mother's a therapist. I mean, how embarrassing. You've got a mother who's a therapist and a lesbian. I mean, what the hell? Yes. I think my daughters really thought that I just came out just to be more embarrassing than I already was, that I did it to spite them.
But it's also not about them. And, I think that is, I think for our children, when we come out later in life, it's totally about us, and really has nothing to do with our family or our husbands or anything. And I think that our kids really struggle to wrap their brain about wait a minute, I'm not the focus of mom's existence right now. And I don't think none of this is conscious. I really do believe it's, for most children, it's subconscious.
And I think they don't like it. And it's worse if they've got a decent mum, somebody they like and get on with, because You know, if we were horrible and nasty, they could just say, I'm not speaking to you because you're horrible and nasty. But it's something, like you say, much more unconscious than that. They don't even know why they don't want to speak to us. And my thoughts is that a lot of it is to do with, I need to separate from you, and could you just stop being nice, so I can tell you to get lost, you know. It's harder. I often think of, you know, when you're in a swimming pool and you have to kick off from the end to give yourself momentum. I think that you know, I tend to be quite a motherly mother, possibly a smotherly mother. So it's a bit as if the end is sort of soft, and when you kick, you still can't push yourself off, you can't get away. So, you know, they have to kick extra hard. If you know, if we're not really sort of hard and tough, they have to
Well,
kick hard to get away.
well, yes, and my child is still in contact with their dad, but I also know that their dad is much more easier for them because he doesn't require much from the kids. He, you know, he will give them anything they want. He still lives in the same house. He's still straight.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just easier for them. He doesn't just because of the nature of the situation, he doesn't require as much for them. You know, as a mother that has come out later in life, I've like, to have a relationship with me requires them to think about me in a different way,
Yeah.
which is really hard when you have grown up in the one who actually has been the most successful at this is my youngest, because he has had to go through everything, like literally go through it. And my three older ones they weren't even living home then. So they had like, I really noticed like they would not think about it and then come home and realize that, oh, wait a minute, mom and dad are not living in the same house anymore. You know, so they like I remember when my third child graduated from college, uh, I think let me think about what year it was. I don't know. It was a couple years after we came up. Both my ex-husband and I were partnered with people. We had both been with them a couple of years at that point. It was 2018. We had both been with them. I was living down here in Nashville already. And my third child asked us not to bring our partners to his graduation. And both my ex-husband called me up and said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm bringing my partner. I mean, like, I'm not going to pretend I'm not with my partner. And so of course he's always been, whatever I do, he does. He said, okay. And so we both brought our partners to his graduation. And but it was like, I was like, why are you like, mom and dad are not together anymore. We are both of us are in relationships for well over a couple of years with somebody else. Like, you know, I'm not going to not show up with my partner to your graduation. You know, I'm just not. And, you know, I'm sure some people out there listening were like, why couldn't you and your husband just show up without your partners because your child asked for it? I'm like, but that's not the reality. And I'm feeding into a fantasy that doesn't exist anymore, because dad and I are not together, and we are not, you know, I don't, you know, we are not, I'm trying to search for the words. We are not a heteronormative family anymore. We're just not, you know, a heteronormative family where both parents are still married.
Yeah. And you're quite right when you say you could make it more comfortable for your child by going on with that, you know, by going with the fantasy. And I think, you know, this is, you know, really when our children are saying to us, you know, please be normal, or, you know, I'm not saying we're not normal, but, you know, please be normal, air quotes, please, you know, please stay the same, please be consistent. And remember, in our first interview, you said to me, why do you use the word selfish in the book title? What my chapter title was Selfish and Destructive. Where does the later life lesbian go for support? And you said, why are you calling later in life lesbians selfish and destructive? It's selfish because we're saying, I have a self, I am a human being, I have needs. And I think it's harder when, for any of us that might have thrown ourselves into mothering, parenting wholeheartedly, for our children, our adult children, to really get this idea that we have a self and we have needs.
Well, yeah, and I've done a tremendous amount of reflection on this, and I threw myself into loving my children and into a relationship with the children. I didn't, and I think, in reflection, this is all in reflection. My ex-husband wasn't emotionally available for me at all. And so it was often me and the kids. Like we would go somewhere, as a family, and I would be with the kids, and my ex-husband would be 20 feet behind me, like looking at the clouds, and the thing is that when I got married, I really wanted to have a family. It was really, really important to me. I write in my book about how when I had my first child, I loved them tremendously, but it didn't fix me. I was expecting it to fix me, and it just didn't. And um, I was a stay-at-home mom. I was a stay-at-home mom, but I always worked, part-time little jobs, I mean, like I waitressed at a steakhouse for several years when the kids were little. It was a savior because I got out and got to talk to adults. And when my two older children were growing up and, both identified as female, I was always like, make sure you work while you have little kids because you need an outlet, because that's what happened to me. I needed an outlet, and I hadn't prepared for one. I hadn't prepared for one. And so what I have come to realize is that my children also got the love that if I had a partner that I was connected to emotionally, like if I was with my wife and she was the other parent of their children, they would have seen their parents be in love with each other. What they mistook, I believe, is we had a mutual respect and a mutual understanding, my ex-husband, and we had a mutual love for these four beings. Like we really loved these four children. He's like a typical later in life husband. He's a good dad. He loves his kids. He's not a bad person. Like it's funny now because I find that when my kids really need emotional support, the three that I'm connected with, they will call me. They will not call their dad because he can't give it. The other last week, my kids don't listen to this podcast, so I can talk about it. But last week, my third child called me, and something happened between him and his brother, and it all had to do with the business that my ex-husband owns and both boys work for. And and I was like trying desperately not to be triangulated. And I'm trying to be like, I can't get into this. This is really complicated stuff. So I'm like, you're trying to toe the line, yet be supportive. And I said, so have you talked to your dad about this, about all this? And my child goes, oh, Dad, you can't talk to him about these things, and I'm like, okay, well, and it was like I was touched that my child called me and sought emotional support through it. And his brother was sort of shitty to him, and so I called his brother. I did get involved and said, you got to go talk to your other brother. You just do, because you hurt his feelings. And I could tell my third child's feelings were really hurt, and they can be a little mean to each other sometimes. The boys, they fight.
And it's great, and it shows what good parenting they've had, that they can contact you in that way, and that they can see their father's shortcomings relationally as well. And a lot of what you're saying I have echoing stories. I'm curious about you and the impact of the estrangement and how you got from, the gut punching, pain, into feeling, okay, feeling,
Feeling to be able to
safe.
talk to you without
Yeah,
crying.
yeah. Well, you said, you're in a good place, you're okay.
Mhm.
How there must have been moments when you were really not okay.
Well, it
Uh,
was
how
especially hard last year because my oldest child announced their engagement and he got married very quickly, which, they're in their almost mid-30s now. And so they're ready to get married and they're really endeavoring to start a family.
Mm,
And the estrangement happened literally a couple of weeks after my oldest announced their engagement. So it made last year incredibly hard for
mm,
not only me,
mm,
but for my oldest child who was really angry and asked their sibling to, like, don't do this, please don't do this. And they did.
mm,
Um, I have some theories about that. Um, I really do believe our family was beginning to heal and move on.
mm,
I really do.
mm.
Um, and I think that um, my second child didn't like it.
Didn't
And
like the
yeah,
healing.
didn't like that because this is all like, okay, this is all hypothesis. I don't know.
Mm,
But this is how I'm making sense of everything.
mm, mm,
And so I am wondering that if we moved on, then they lose what was.
mm, mhm,
And I am wondering if that had something to do with it. It also caused them to be the center of attention when their oldest sibling, who doesn't ask for that very much, they really, really don't.
mm,
They really, really don't. That they're just not that way. Um, when so they caused them to be the center of attention on a year that was supposed to be a celebration for
yeah.
my oldest child.
Mm,
And so like looking back, it really, really bothered my oldest child. It was really hard for them. Um, it really caused a lot of sadness with their brothers because they graduated from they're therapists, by the way, my my second child. And as I know, as somebody who's gone into the helping professions, that a lot of times when you're new to it, you embrace everything that therapy teaches you as a therapist.
yep,
And
that's
sometimes and I also know that the majority, 100% of their class identified as queer. They got their master's of social work. They're going to be a licensed clinical social worker. And I know, like, I remember when I was in a master's program, I was sitting with like 8 people, and everybody told like how horrible their childhood stories were.
yeah, yes, like my therapy training, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay. So like I have a lot of compassion for all of that.
Mm,
I do.
mm,
But like when they graduated from this very prestigious institution, they didn't invite me to the graduation. Um,
mm,
and but also too, they didn't invite their brothers either. They just invited their older sibling and their dad and his partner. And that broke my heart.
yeah.
Really broke my heart. But it also broke their brother's heart.
Mm,
My youngest was so sad about it because
mm,
he would have liked to have gone.
yeah.
And my third child has a lot of male bravado. So he's like, oh, it's fine. I don't care. But I know them that
Mm,
underneath the male bravado that my third child has is he's a very sensitive person.
mm,
And so it was painful for our family. Like, it was painful. My second child, my oldest married somebody who's Indian. They had a bunch of weddings last year. So they had an American wedding in April, and then they had a huge Indian wedding in September. And so the whole family went to California twice to celebrate this marriage. And and neither time my second child. I mean, they were sort of cordial to me, but by the time September had come around, I was so hurt by them because the graduation, the non-invitation to the graduation, I was like, I can't pretend with you. I can't pretend that everything is fine. I just can't. I mean, be very clear, I was cordial and everything like that. Like, nobody, and if you didn't know what was going on, you know. But like, what I noticed is, like, my whole family was there, and my second child, who was my family was very involved in raising my kids, my two sisters, and like, they never came over and spent any time like with my sisters, you know. And that really hurt my sisters' feelings because we've spent vacations with them and when they were all growing up. And so when you estrange yourself from a parent, you also estrange yourself from other people. You know, you don't get the full enjoyment of everything because you're avoiding that parent. And so, yeah. And so it just made everything so hard. And what really grieves me is that I did not get to fully enjoy my first child's wedding. I just did, because you know, I'm just not, I wish I was like, at this point, I wish I was a compartmentalizer a little bit, but it was just hard. And it was hard for everyone. When my oldest child went to get their dress, um, I went out to California to help her pick it out. And they asked their sibling not to come because they were like, I don't want the tension there. I just don't want the tension. I want to pick out this dress with mom and not have you there. And their sibling was surprised. Their sibling also was really shocked that their older sister did not have the same feelings about me that they did. And they were stunned that that their like Carly said to me, my oldest daughter said to me, they were so stunned that I didn't feel that I wasn't angry at you the way they were. Like, and they used the word stunned. And so this answer to your question, I've processed this by, you know, and also trying to give them a lot of grace, because I know what it's like to be a new professional in the field. And I also cried a lot. I had to change my medication because the medication I was on was making me suicidal. And so I really had to get support around that. And luckily, you know, I've never been a suicidal person. Some people struggle with that their whole life. That's not me. And so I had suicidal ideation all last year. And so in November of last year, I decided to talk to my, you know, I have what we call a psychiatric APRN in here, and I've had one for years because I believe that I need a floor under me. I'm one of those people that do. I have pretty bad anxiety. And so I talked to her about it, and we switched medications. And Glennon Doyle takes Lexapro. She's very, very open about that. I don't know if she still takes it, but she goes there. She says, Jesus loves me so because he gave me Lexapro. and so when I was on one medication that was causing the suicidal ideation. And so I thought it was all due to what was going on. And I think it may have been a combination of both. But once I switched medications, oh my God, it was like night and day. I felt, I mean, within 2 weeks,
Mm.
I no longer had the suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
Um, and which was when you've struggled with suicidal ideation for
Mm.
6 months. And when you have it, it's not like it's always there. It just comes up,
Yeah.
it's when you're dealing with it, it like comes up for a day or two and then goes away. It comes up. But like now when I look back at last year, I'm like, wow, that was hard.
Yeah.
And it was really, really normal. And I've since then have started to do a lot of research about this because I think it's something we need to talk about in our society because not only queer people have this, but also straight people.
Mm.
It really, and you know me, when I go through something horrible, then I want to create something to help other people.
I'm exactly the same. I think you and I have very similar personality types when we discuss parenting and supporting others
Yeah.
and integrating
And
our traumas. Mm.
yeah, and I think that's one of the ways I integrate my trauma because my old therapist was telling me for years, Emery, you need to create a program to help people that are going through estrangement. I'm like, absolutely not. I don't want to do that.
I think,
Now I'm starting to think about it,
yeah,
and and I've been doing some research, and what they say is when somebody like it is like one of the worst things you can do to a person is to totally cut them off with no reason or explanation beyond I'm pissed at you right now.
yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
hugely
and
damaging. People don't realize it's a massive trauma. It is killing a deep attachment. And
mhm.
I and even from the other side, your child is not yet of an age to realize what Tonda, your wife, and what my wife know, which is that having family behind you is a privilege and an advantage in life. Similar to being white or being straight,
Mhm.
being male.
Mhm.
The to have family support makes a difference on every level: education, finance, well-being, and access to healthcare, all of those things. Mm.
Well, and actually their older sibling, so they just have gone through some a major shakeup in their life. A long-term relationship that they'd been in for a long, like 7 years, ended. And so I've sent them several texts, like, like, hey, I love you. If you need anybody to talk to, I'm here. I understand what it's like to lose a relationship that you thought was going to last forever. They don't reply. But I was talking to my older child about this, and they said, well, my sibling needs a mom right now. They really need a mom.
Mm.
And, I'm here.
Yeah,
Um, but
yeah.
they don't, but they haven't reached out. They've reached out once. On my 60th birthday, they reached out and said that I invited them to it. Everybody, all my other kids came here for my 60th birthday. We had a big, huge party. I invited them. I think I never heard anything from them. And then on the night of my birthday, they sent me an email and said, I know everybody's down there. Um, I just happy birthday, mom. And I just emailed them back and I said, you are missed. I love you. And then they emailed me back and said, I love you too. And that's the last time I heard from them.
Mm.
Um, but as we move forward, Miriam, I want to talk to you about something is that so much, and also how I've gotten over this is
That's
therapy, medication, and also going inward. Um, Ironically, really working in meditation. I'm a huge meditator. I meditate every single day.
yeah.
I do a lot of different types of meditation. I know this has activated my inner child, and it also I have abandonment issues. This has definitely activated my abandonment issues. So I have done I do like inner child meditations. I mean, I love Insight Timer. If you have Insight Timer, if you ever need a spokesperson, I can be your spokesperson. I love Insight Timer because you can find whatever you need. And so that's what I do. I also throw myself into helping people when I feel a little overwhelmed, but I did not do this time. I'm really proud of myself when my therapist was like, because I threw my feelings about coming out were so difficult that I threw myself into caretaking for our later in life community too soon. But I learned from that, and I was like, nope, not ready to help people who are going through estrangement. I want to feel my feelings with this. So that's what I've done. But and one of the things, this is really big for me. One of the things people say to me, like, because they're caring and they care about me, and they say to me, oh, they'll come back to you. I know that they'll come back to you. I'm sure they will. And I'm like, I don't know if I want them back.
And
Like,
that's a key moment of yourself. It's like you're saying what yourself feels, not what you're supposed to say in your role.
As the mom, the mom of unconditional love,
Mm.
I will always love them.
Mm.
That's hands down.
Mm.
But I also have a lot of respect for myself. And if this was anybody but my child, anybody, they would have been long gone years ago, years and years and years ago, because they've been really hard from the beginning. But I kept holding on, hoping that they would eventually get to a place of acceptance of the change, acceptance of who I am, acceptance of how things are different now. And so I kept waiting and tiptoeing around them really for a long time. And now that this has happened, I'm like, how do I let them back into my life if they come back? How do I do that?
So just take a breath, because it sounded to me as if you said, how do I do that? And almost stopped breathing. So that indicates to me you're right onto something here. Well, what's the, what I'm noticing almost in your body is you go into quite almost a stillness. What's the inner argument there, Anne-Marie, about when you say, how do I do that? Well, if you had two voices arguing in your head, what are the two voices saying?
I don't want to do that, but it's also expected of me to do that.
You don't want to do it.
Unless there's serious conversation and repair. And I'm very willing to go and, talk to someone like yourself, and listen to what they have to say. But I have felt very voiceless in this, and because they haven't listened, and I feel very, very voiceless. And I also have a tremendous amount of anger. And so I'm not going to just fall back into a relationship because they reach out. I really feel like that we need to do some serious couples counseling.
Yes.
Yeah, for at least so that both of us can feel heard. Because I'm not going to just accept somebody back into my life that has been intentionally cruel. I feel like they've been intentionally cruel.
Yeah.
And other people around me who know the situation extremely well. Like my ex-husband, who I don't really have much of a relationship, begged them to why are you not inviting your mother to this?
Yeah.
He's so funny. So he also put all of our videos from them when they were children on digital. He digitized them and send them to everyone. And there's so much of the two older ones. The last one, there's 6 minutes of them. And so normal. I'm the fifth. There's 4 pictures of me from the child.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm hoping that they will remember that what how wonderful everything was for them. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, why didn't you tell them? But anyway, in his own way, he was trying to do some repair because he's sort of horrified by all of this. So people that who really know both of us, who really know the situation, are just sort of like, why are you, like, your mom wasn't this horrible human being. Why are you doing this? And so I lost my train of thought.
Well, I've sort of two things I wanted to say while we let your train of thought reconnect. Was I again, it's hypothesis, we don't know, but I do think a lot of it is probably to do with the culture of their training.
Mhm.
And I've been through this, and I've ignored my parents. And as part, when I was going through my deep therapy, and some of it I think was quite valid, but I have real regrets about the peer pressure, and real love for. I said to you before we started recording, when I found these notes that my dad had posted through my door to me saying, I just dropped around to see if you were around. And I thought, oh, he would have been, in his early 50s. He still tried through all,
Mhm.
through that period of time when, I wasn't interested in having parents.
Mhm.
Um, it wasn't part of the group ethos of
Mhm.
the what I belonged to.
Of
So
that group, yeah.
I
Mhm.
think some of it is that, but I'm thinking about I often talk about the internal support, and that's, you've talked about the meditation that you
Mhm.
do, and this sort of taking care of yourself and allowing yourself, and the external support, which I hope is us,
Mhm.
your sisters in the community, and
And my
so
sisters, actually, my real
real
biological sisters,
sisters,
like,
yeah,
they're like, they're like, what is going on here? Because
yeah.
they remember everything. They were there, they witnessed everything, and like, and they're like, Anne-Marie, you were such a wonderful mother to those children. Like, and they get a little ticked off at my kids now. They're like, grow up.
Yeah. Well, I think this is, it is a huge part of our culture that that the kids really struggle with this transition whereby we're human beings with needs. But thinking about your internal and external support, I'm wondering if that is as you've discussed this, whether that's your answer, and the chemical support actually of your medication review, that, that is important. And I'm glad you mentioned it, and
Mhm.
hope listeners are taking that in, that
Please,
sometimes
please, if you need medication, please go get it.
yeah.
Please, it'll change your life.
And
Yeah.
if you're on medication, get it reviewed regularly,
Mhm.
because sometimes, like Anne-Marie said, the side effects can be
And
exactly
that was,
what you
yeah,
need.
the old medication that I was on, that's one of the side effects.
But
Yeah,
I suppose what I'm thinking is, and I wouldn't say to you, your child will come back to you, because we don't know.
right.
And I think that's this difficulty, because it's not a clean death. I mean, bereavement, as you know, working as a bereavement specialist, bereavement is really tough, but at least you know where you are in terms of
Mhm.
your future relationship with
Relationship.
that
Yeah.
person.
Mhm. Mhm.
So this interview is not about a conclusion of, and then everything was all right, or and then it was resolved. This interview is about having a life and having a sense of okayness and having a sense of self alongside an ongoing tragedy.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. And
Well,
and I suppose I'm wondering, it's really hard when you're in something to encapsulate it in a, some sort of pithy advice. But what would you say to somebody who's in this place?
um, all the things that you mentioned, but it was interesting when I started to do research on it. One of the things is that the person said, which I had already been doing, is it is really important to go inward and to use meditation and other things to just be silent, but also to be silent to be able to become become being able to like become a viewer of your emotions and not to fall into them.
Yeah.
And I love what you said, Miriam, because it is definitely about, yes, this has happened, but I have, I've worked really hard to be happy, and I am happy in my life. I have a contentment that I never knew before in my straight life. And so I am not going to let this ruin what I have.
Mm.
And I grieved for a year, and I really came into I feel like I left it in 2023. um I'm still grieving it, obviously. When I talk about it, it brings tears and stuff like that, but I really finding support, I think, and I'm also doing, like I mentioned before we came on the air, is that I'm doing somatic work because
Mm.
I've had such a heaviness in my chest and throat. And so one of the ways you release your throat chakra is to talk about things. And so I think for me, like talking about this with you and using it as an example for other people, because I'm not the only one. I know, like, when I am not the only one. And Brené Brown said that when you put shame in a petri dish and douse it with empathy, it loses its power. And so I am really endeavoring to talk about this because I am trying to let go of the shame
Yeah,
that
yes.
there's something wrong with me, or that
Mm.
I did something wrong. Um, and there's nothing wrong with me. This is my child's journey that doesn't have anything to do with me. It has, ironically, it has given me empathy for my mother because I was always really hard on her.
Yeah, me too, and I understand that, and I'm really touched by your capacity to, take that and turn around and look at, when have you been,
Yeah.
similar.
Yeah. I like think about my mom and I, and we had like, I was fighting with her. Like, my whole relationship was fighting with her to be seen. She didn't have the capacity to do that.
Mm.
But I should have just accepted that instead of I should have, I even knew that she just was not capable of doing that.
Yeah.
But I was so hard on her. We fought a lot. And I wish, if I had a do-over, I wish I would have just been like able to roll my eyes and go, oh, that's my mom.
Yeah,
There's
but you
nothing I
would,
can do about it.
it'd be extremely hard to do that because, this is the fundamental of, it's wired into us that survival, for survival, we need our mother to see us.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then, I think that when we become parents, that what we care about at that point is the baby's survival. And
Mhm.
I'm geared into, are they still breathing? And
Oh my
um,
God,
all of
yes.
that,
Yeah.
and then eventually, and I think that, I've really struggled with the letting go of my children and stop checking if they're still breathing, if when they're adults, I certainly went through that when when they first got acquainted with alcohol, are they still
Mhm.
breathing the next morning? That, that's that sort of thing. But it was part of me letting go and letting them go off and do what they needed to do was extremely difficult because I'd taken on the survival need. So it's all wired into our fight flight. So the
Mhm.
odds of you being able to go, oh, well, if my mum doesn't see me, I can take it or leave it. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
great aspiration, but it's really right down in your nervous system, which is another
Well, if she
somatic.
had Yeah, and if she had lived to this point, I probably could have gotten there about now.
Yeah,
That's
about that.
probably not. Even before that, one of my greatest gifts is that both my parents were gone when I came out. So
Yeah.
it's not my greatest gifts, but it was nice not to have to deal with having to deal with them, and so many of our people have to deal with them, and I just didn't, so.
Yeah, and for the later in life people listening, there can be the complete opposite reaction to the one that, that your child has had. One of your four, we have to statistically, is that, I remember saying to my daughter, is it about me having come out? And she was sort of crying. She's like, no, she said, I'm really, really glad you've got a life, because I don't feel responsible for, looking after you and making sure you're happy. So, and my kids love my wife, and I believe your kids love Tonda, don't they? And, and part of it is, if we were sad, in a marriage where we weren't being seen or heard or living on our own, that our kids might have to parent us, or feel they had to parent us. So by finding our new loves and our new relationships, for some of the adult children, they breathe a sigh of relief, which is good. Mum's taken care of.
Mom's taken care of. Yeah, actually, I'm going to let this be the last word because I have to go. But my third child said to my wife, if you ever try to leave my mom, I'm going to drive down there and block the driveway. So you because ironically, Miriam, I think he's like, oh, good, I don't have to worry about my mom. She's with somebody that loves her and can take care of her. And it was just so funny when he said that, because he was like, I'm really glad she's with you, because I know you love her and you'll take care of her.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's been lovely to talk to you. It's felt very intimate, as if it were
Yes.
just the two of us. And every now and again, I remember there's people listening as well. And I would love to invite myself back.
Yes. So Miriam has some we're going to have Miriam come back in a month or two, because she's got some really great advice about how to handle your adult children. And we're going to talk about that. We were going to try to get to it today, but we didn't. So we will for our listeners, we're going to talk about, how to work, she has divided it into 3 different types of adult children, and how to have a really healthy as we can relationship, depending on where your kid falls. And in that, and you know what? Kids fall in all different types of relationships, from very close to very estranged. And I have that even in my own family. So want to give you some advice. So Miriam, will you come back?
Absolutely. And it's real life that, none of these relationships are perfect. So
Right.
I look forward to talking with you some more about that.
Yes. And thank you so much. Thank you for support. Thank you for listening. I feel better.
Yeah, I'm so proud of you for sharing this story. It's important.
You've been listening to Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA+ Stories with Anne-Marie Zanzal. New episodes of the Coming Out and Beyond podcast drop every other Friday. You can tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at annemariezanzal.com. Be sure to hit subscribe when tuning in so you never miss an episode. And for more resources, articles, videos, and a free downloadable guide for coming out later in life, visit annemariezanzal.com.